In the process of replacing my top idler pulley, I realized that my alternator pulley also was going bad. So I went ahead and ordered a replacement from Pelican Parts. And the thing to note about these alternator pulleys is they're called overrun pulleys or freewheeling pulleys. And that essentially means that when you rev your engine way up and you get the alternator spinning really, really fast, and then you let off the gas all of a sudden, it allows the alternator to keep spinning with its own inertia or momentum rather than stop suddenly and put a lot of stress on the belt and wear the belt out quickly and also cause an unexpected drop in voltage. So that's great, good idea, except they tend to fail more often, and they're also a little bit trickier to take off because the inside can turn and the outside can turn. So on this particular car, the Porsche 911 996, and I assume the 997 is probably the same, you have to hold the alternator in place while you turn the pulley, or vice versa. And the way that it's threaded is such that you actually want to turn the pulley to the left or counterclockwise while you're either holding the alternator in place or turning it to the right or clockwise. Now, if the alternator were out of the vehicle, this would be much easier to do. You do need a special tool, as I mentioned, and I will show you. You do need a special tool. It looks like this. Essentially, this goes into the center of the alternator, holds it, and can keep it from spinning. And then this piece slides over it. These teeth right here lock into the pulley itself, and then you can use a second wrench to either turn the pulley or hold it in place independent of the alternator. In this particular tool I bought on Amazon, although they sell them many places. It just says Bosch alternator wrench. It has 8088 up in the corner, and it's made by ctatools.com. Overall, the tool seemed to work pretty well. I did have to tap it a little bit to get it fully seated, so make sure that it is fully seated before you start wrenching on it, because my pulley in particular was on extremely tight and I had a lot of trouble breaking it loose. A couple notes on that: you need a 17mm wrench to hold this centerpiece and a 1/2 inch drive ratchet to turn the other piece. So I only had a closed in offset 17mm wrench. So in order to use it, I had to actually put the wrench on this piece and put the tool into the alternator pulley already assembled like this. And I was not able to break it loose by hand. I actually felt like these were starting to flex just in this engine compartment. There's not a lot of room to work with. However, I did find a trick to break it loose surprisingly easily, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. Save you a lot of time. But the key thing that isn't immediately obvious that you do need to know, at least with this car, and it can vary car by car, is the direction that you need to turn everything. So you want to turn this long one that goes to the alternator itself. It needs to go clockwise, whereas the pulley needs to be turning counterclockwise to unthread off of the stud. So the trick here was to get this breaker bar between the two wrenches and twist it in a way that turns the outside one clockwise and the inside one counterclockwise. And that broke it loose, and you just want to be careful not to actually hit your car or the paint with any of these tools. But that was the only way I was able to actually get this broken loose. Once you have that off, you simply thread the new one on. It threads on clockwise, and you should be able to get it started by hand, and then very quickly the entire unit will start spinning. So you will need to use your tool in the opposite direction now to actually tighten it. Oh, one other thing to note, there is a little black plastic cap that covers the center, so you just have to pop that off with a screwdriver in order to access what you need to access. So and now to tighten it, I'm turning the pulley itself, so the inside wrench, clockwise, and then taking this 1/2 inch ratchet on the outside and turning it counterclockwise. And just snug it up the best you can, but the direction that the belts actually spin helps tighten it, so it really shouldn't come loose. And then replace the little plastic center cap, reinstall your belt, as I've covered in another video, and you should be good to go. So one of the ways I was able to identify that this was going bad, so I mentioned earlier it's an overrun pulley or freewheeling pulley. It continues to spin even if the engine slows down or stops. I actually could hear a whining noise, and when I shut the engine off it continued for a second or two right back here. So that pointed directly to this, because this is really the only thing that keeps spinning once the engine shuts off. Now, it is very possible that it's bearing inside the alternator itself that's bad, but this, at least I thought at the time, would be the easiest way to hopefully fix it, because the part was only about $40 and it's relatively easy to access. It was just difficult to break loose. Okay. Really quick overview of the tools required to do this project. Outside of what you need to remove your factory airbox, I used a half-inch breaker bar, a 15/16 half-inch socket to actually loosen the belt, a 17mm offset wrench. However, any 17mm wrench will work. The longer the better, because it is tight. A half-inch drive ratchet, again, longer the better. And then the special alternator pulley removal tool. And that was it for this project. It was pretty straightforward. It was just difficult to break it loose.